They traverse large areas to look for food, to look for breeding sites, and also to look for mates. And therefore, when we have critically endangered birds around, it becomes so hard to monitor them because they move kilometers far away from here.
Thanks for tuning into Tusk Talks, a podcast that explores and shares the extraordinary life stories of dynamic and inspirational conservationists working across Africa today. From the coastal deserts of Namibia to the islands of the Comoros and the wildlife-rich uplands of northern Kenya, in this podcast, we meet the progressive change makers who are dedicating their lives to protecting Africa's wildlife and wild places and to empowering local communities. My name is Joanna Eede, and I am a nature storyteller and head of communications for Tusk. I'll talk to some of the beneficiaries of the Lewa Safari Marathon, a collaboration between Tusk and the Lewa Wildlife Conservancy in Kenya. In this first episode, I will be talking to Eunice Kamau, who joined Lewa Conservancy in February 2019 as a research assistant and now heads up the avifauna and hydromet research and monitoring sections. Welcome to the podcast. Could we start by you telling our listeners about your role at Lewa Wildlife Conservancy and how it has changed in the 5 years that you have been there?
Thank you so much, Joanne. My name is Eunice Kamau, a research assistant at Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, and I currently head avifauna research and monitoring, as well as hydrology and meteorology research. And in the past 5 years, since I joined Lewa, I've been able to establish a bird checklist on Lewa Wildlife Conservancy. I've also been able to establish research protocols for birds and also formed a bird club that we use to educate people who are interested in knowing more about birds. And through that, we've also been able to, in conjunction with other people, we've been able to participate in global and international events at Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, which have helped us to really reach out to other people about the birds that we have here and the work that we are doing in avifauna research.
And where did your passion for ornithology and for all things to do with birds stem from? How did that develop?
I've been brought up in an area where wildlife interacts with human, and getting to see wildlife when I was very young, that grew my passion in wildlife. And because birds are so diverse and almost nearly found everywhere, and being attracted by their vocals, being attracted by their beautiful colors, I was able to have a close relationship with birds. And once I finished my high school, I was able to undertake a course in wildlife because I was so passionate to learn more about wildlife that I've been seeing while I was very young. And once I joined campus, I was able to participate in other events, bird watching events, like going out and looking for birds, trying to come with birds checklist within our school. And by doing that, it really grew my passion in birds conservation. And I'm very happy because that's what I'm doing today. I'm working for birds and I'm working with birds.
Wonderful. Really sounds like you're very much living your commitment to birds and your interest in them. Can you tell us and the listeners what has been the main focus of your work in the last couple of years?
Being that we started the research on fauna in 2019, so the first thing we did was to update our birds checklist. We were able to collate all different bird checklists that were done by individuals prior 2019, and we were able to come up with a checklist currently at 492 different bird species. And after that, we also established key monitoring species for avifauna. And one was water birds monitoring and raptors monitoring. And this is because this group of birds are critically endangered. Most of them are endangered by different factors, and therefore we needed to have a cross monitoring of these families so that we can be able to estimate their population as well as assess the threats that are facing these birds, and we can be able to take up conservation plans for these species. And then we also participate in national and international birds events. We go out with other people who are interested in birds because we have a birding club, and we are able to organize bird surveys with them. We are able to go out and participate in bird walks and also participate in events such as the eBird Global Bird Count, where in Lewa for the past years, we've been able to be one of the top hotspots of birds here in Kenya.
Wow, that's wonderful. Could you tell us a little bit about how climate change is affecting migrating birds and what in particular you notice?
One of the major impact of climate change for migratory birds is we call it timing mismatch, and this is when birds are supposed to migrate. You get that because they are supposed to migrate from wintering areas to come into maybe to areas where the temperatures are a bit low. You get that because of climate change, we have mismatch of temperatures. We have for example, desertification. We have drought wherever we're supposed to, the birds should come and get food. And therefore, once they migrate, they meet that there's drought. Therefore, we have changing of food sources that are disrupted by results of climate change, such as degradation. We also have breeding grounds and also wintering grounds. If their wintering grounds and breeding grounds are affected by climate change, then you get that these birds will not be able to breed. And when they're also migrating, they get that their wintering areas don't have sufficient food because of effects of climate change, such as drought. You get that these birds are affected and they won't have enough energy for them to soar back to their breeding grounds, for example, in Europe. And also, we have a changing in migratory routes. If the temperature is too high in some of migratory routes for these birds, you get that their migratory routes will somehow be disrupted because of, for example, increase in temperature that is caused by climate change.
So, with migratory route, if the temperature is too high, what happens? Do they literally change course? Is that something you've observed?
Yeah, this is something that we can say has affected the migratory routes. And this is because, for example, in Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, 5 years ago, we used to get lots of European stocks. These are Eurasian migrants from Europe. And currently in Lewa, we have, they just come in hundreds, whereas they used to come in thousands. So you get that because of effects such as timing mismatch and change of these migratory routes, those are some of the factors that could have affected these birds, such that nowadays we're not seeing them migrating in thousands.
Where do they go? If they're not coming to Lewa in their thousands, but they're now coming in their hundreds, where are the rest going?
So you get that, for example, these Eurasian migrate, if they're supposed to migrate from Europe, and then Europe, maybe there's no snow because snow is the one that covers food, and these birds are forced to migrate to come to maybe areas like Africa to come and maybe get away from their wintering areas. So you get, if there's no snow, if the country where they're residing is not snowing, then they won't be forced to migrate. So you get most of them choose to stay there, and also most that which migrate because of factors like this, you get that even most of them don't make their way back. So the numbers of these migratory birds have also reduced because of such factors.
Of course, birds are highly responsive to environmental change, such as climate change and pollution, and they are known as important ecological indicators. Could you explain this a little bit more? Why are they so important as ecological indicators?
Birds are usually termed as ecological indicators, and this is because birds are conspicuous and very easy to observe, and they're found everywhere. So, wherever there is any change in the environment, you get that most birds will be affected because of their size. The size is very small. So, for example, we have pollution or an oil spill, the birds will be affected very fast. You'll see the change very fast because if they are feeding on something that is polluted, it will take very few hours for it to affect the body. of the bird because it's very small. And then because there are so many, they'll be affected, and you'll be able to see birds that are dropping dead. And that one can really tell you easily that there's something wrong in the environment that you're in.
And what are the main methods that you use to monitor the birds on Lewa? How does that work in a typical day? What would be your daily pattern of monitoring?
For water birds, we usually use point count methods, and this is where we visit all our water areas, the wetland areas. We have dams, we have swamps, we have marshes, we have rivers. So we use point count to go and count all the water birds. So we just drive to a dam, and then we use our binoculars and our books to identify the species. And we also use eBird and bird laser as the main application for collecting the data. And then for birds of prey, we use distance sampling along transect. So we are able to count the different birds of prey that we sight. And we also key them in our applications, that's the eBird app and the bird laser app. And then we also use nest surveys for conducting birds of prey abundance. So this one just supplements the transect method. So we drive to the nest that we have already identified in the field, and then we monitor the status of those nests.
What are the most unusual birds that you find on Lewa? And have you had any new species in the last couple of years that have arrived?
Yes, we have very unique birds here on Lewa, and the first one is called a snowy headed robinchat. And this is a bird that is mostly found on the western parts of Kenyan forests. But we sighted it here on Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, and this was the first record in the eastern, the Rift Valley, because most of them are found on the western sides. And then we have the most critically vultures here on Lewa, and we also have the Somali ostrich that is usually found from this range of the northern Kenya.
What are the main challenges in looking after and conserving these bird species that are critically endangered and so beneficial for ecosystems? What are the main challenges outside of climate change?
Yes, because birds know no boundaries and generally wildlife, and therefore they traverse large areas to look for food, to look for breeding sites, and also to look for mates. And therefore, when we have critically endangered birds around, and it becomes so hard to monitor them because they move kilometers far away from here. But with the current technology, we're looking forward to use like satellite telemetry to monitor these birds so that we can be able also to assess the threats they face once they leave Lewa and go find new areas. And birds like vultures that traverse large areas and currently being faced by so many threats, and they are critically endangered. So it's really a challenge to monitor them, but I think with the current technology, we are heading somewhere.
Fantastic. That's very good news. The Lewa Safari Marathon, an amazing running race held on the beautiful terrain of the Lewa Conservancy. And donations from participants who run go to the conservation efforts for many different species and also towards empowering communities. Can you explain a little bit about what the biggest impact has been of the Lewa Safari Marathon from your point of view?
I think the Lewa Safari Marathon has been one of the important activities that Lewa hosts, and that helps to raise funds for conservation and also community development. From my point of view, I think this is a very critical activity, being that it incorporates people from outside to come and run alongside wildlife. It's also a time that people can be able to have the aesthetic value for wildlife. Apart from what we're doing in conservation, they have a chance to come on the ground and see our wildlife, see our habitat, and then the money that is raised is helped to conserve these critically endangered species and also the communities around us. And from that, we've also seen how the communities are supporting the conservation efforts that the Lewa is doing. And we have also seen the species, the critically endangered species that we conserve here. They're really doing well, and therefore, I think from my point of view, the Lewa Marathon is very critical for Lewa for scaling up our efforts in conservation of wildlife.
Can you tell us about a meaningful moment or interaction you have had with a bird on Lewa? Is there one moment that really stands out for you as one that underlines why you do the work that you do?
From our nest monitoring activity that we do, I get a time to get close to birds activity, which is breeding. So I've monitored one nest for martial eagle, which is an endangered eagle here at Lewa. And we monitored the bird as it was collecting some sticks to go and make a nest. We monitored that bird throughout the cycle of breeding up to when they were courting, when they were hatched a chick, and we monitored that chick until it full-fledged. I think that is so satisfying as a researcher, just being able to see how birds are breeding in our habitat and how successful that activity is, meaning that our ecosystem is habitable for these birds and provides safe place for them to breed. And seeing now this juvenile young martial eagle flying out to go and find a new home range, it's very satisfying.
I can imagine that sounds beautiful to see that life cycle. Very rewarding. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is for men and women to collaborate in conservation? And do you think you are seeing an increase in the number of women in Africa taking on important roles in the conservation world?
I think conservation knows no gender. Men and women have equal opportunities to work in this area. And in the current past, we've seen a lot of women taking up conservation initiatives and scaling up their conservation effort. And even we've seen institutions that are really empowering women through different programs to take up more bigger roles in conservation. And therefore, I feel that in the coming future, women will be the key leaders in conservation as well as men.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Eunice. It's been lovely talking to you and wonderful to hear all your thoughts about your very important work at Lewa Wildlife Conservancy.
Thank you so much, Joanne. It was an honor.
Thank you for listening to Tusk Talks, stories from Africa's conservation voices. If you have enjoyed listening to the voices of Tusk's partners, please subscribe and share the podcast with friends and family. And if you would like to find out more about the Lewa Safari Marathon, the impact it has and the race itself, please head over to lewasafarimarathon.com and stay tuned for a sneak listen to the next episode.
Obviously it's a unique animal that's only really found within their area. So nowadays, that's one of the points of pride. I think it's considered by the Samburu to be one of their 5 animals, or the Samburu Big Five, as they call them.